Hi, in this video we're going to look at the basics of Pandas and how you can perform data manipulation using the Pandas library in Python. Now this video is just part of an entire playlist that is concerned with getting you up to speed with Pandas. And so for a start we're going to have to install Pandas. So I go to my virtual environment here and I'm going to pip install Pandas. As you can see, I'm actually using PyCharm. Of course, you can use any code editor you like, but I believe PyCharm is one of the better ones out there. And of course, I'm using PyCharm Community Edition, which is free, so that's always good. Next, we can install NumPy. Okay, already exists. So for this series, we are majorly focused on using Pandas for data wrangling, data manipulation for this series. And so we have what we need. We have Pandas, we have NumPy, and we can go back here. Now for this, we're going to start with the very basics, and we're going to use the iris dataset. I can open it. Iris dataset as a case study. I feel like this is a good way to get into it. So let's come to the launcher here. I'm using Jupyter Lab, although you can use Jupyter Notebooks, the same thing, or you could use Google Colab, any notebook environment you're comfortable with, or if you want, you could just write your pure Python script. So let's open this. And let's create a markdown, just say Pandas basics. So with Pandas, it's library concerned with working with Python. I'm going to put a link to the documentation down here so you can, go look at other stuff there. It works with different data files. So whether you're dealing with CSV files, Excel files, SQLite files, different things, right? For this and for most of what we'll do here, we're going to import with CSV files. So one of the very first functions we're going to use is the read CSV function. But before that, we're going to have to import our libraries. So let's import Pandas as PD. Okay, now we have Pandas installed. Next, we're going to do the very first thing you're going to do whenever you just have a data set is you want to import it. So what does that mean? You're telling Python to take your data set from a file, whether it's a CSV file, Excel file, Parquet file, or from a database, and put it into a variable in Python so that we can manipulate it programmatically. So we're going to call it df, which is just short for dataframe, but you can call it any variable you want. Just based on convention, most people use df, so that's why we're using df. And now these are the different options. Now, of course, if you're on a Mac, you press your tab, and to show you all the options, you can see what the options are. We can import from a CSV file, Excel file, Feather file, GBQ, HTML, JSON, so many ones. This is what we want. Okay, so now that we have this, next you want to provide the name of the file or the file location as a string. And in this case, we're going to start with the most basic data set that we all know, which is the iris data set. Okay, and that's it. We can check some of the other documentation. The other things you can do when you use the read CSV function. The main thing is you want to supply the file name, but there are other parameters you can supply here as well. We're not really concerned about this for now, so it's going to read everything, which is fine. About the basics, let me put some new cells. So we've imported our file here, into Pandas or into a programmatic form. So say data import. All right. The next thing you'd want to do is you want to look at the data, right? So for that, we'll look at the head or the tail of the data or sample. So let's say we want to view the data. So let's create a markdown file here and say view data. So we've imported data. I want to view it. First thing you'd want to do is you might want to look at the head of the data. So say df.head. Now this function, what it essentially does is it shows you the top 5 rows by default of the data set. So, if you wanted to show the top 10 or the top 100 or the top 3, you just specify it as a parameter there and it shows you that. Of course, there's much more to this, but the default is, providing what the n is. That's pretty much it. Once you provide what the n is, you're good to go. So these are the top 3 rows. What if I want to see the top or the bottom 3 rows? I'm going to use a different function. Let me write a comment here. What if I want to look at the bottom 3 rows? Simple. I could do df.tail. I feel like that's very intuitive. Tail, bottom, So we can provide a number there. Run it. These are actually the bottom 3 rows of the data set. Okay, so we've done this. What if you don't want to see the top, you don't want to see the bottom rows, you just want a sample of the data? Let's create more things here. There's a sample function in Pandas, and it's just very simple. You say df.sample, and you specify how many samples you want. The interesting thing about this sample function is, as you provide it, or as you rerun it, it changes what it gives you every point in every step of the way, right? So you see, if I run it multiple times, it changes what it provides me. So that's good. This is good if you just want to see or you want to get a feel for what the other rows of the data look like. Now, it's possible, if your data set is not that big, you can, view it. There are some settings where Pandas will allow you to be able to view unlimited rows in your data sets. Very basic stuff, but we're not really concerned about that. We're more concerned about getting to know the basic functionality. So we've done this, the view of data. Now, one of the good things about Pandas is it really helps with statistical summary. So let's look at getting information about the data. So let's give it a markdown, say getting information about the data. Getting data information. So, we've looked at how to view certain number of rows. What if you just want to know how many rows and columns do you have? For that, you use the shape attribute. So you say df.shape. And this shows, it returns a tuple, which shows you the number of rows and the number of columns. That's literally what it does, right? So in this data set, we have 150 rows of data and we have 6 columns of data. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So that's what it is. It's a attribute. Okay, it returns the shape of the data. Great. Now, what if we want to just get general information about the data? This is where the info function comes in. So we say df.info. Now you see here, it provides us with a lot of information, right? So it shows us that we have 6 columns in total. It has the column name, non-null count, and the data type. So the non-null count, what it is essentially saying, okay, for each of these columns, how many rows have a value? And then what is the data type of the values in this column? So we can see here, for all the sepal length, sepal weight, petal length, petal weight, they're all floats, meaning they have a decimal point. And we can see that it's 150 non-null for all of them. And we know that the number of rows is 150. So that way, we already know that there is actually no missing value here. Now, when you look at the species column, it has 150 non-null, which is great. But it also has an object data type. meaning that it's a string. And of course, if you look at this, you see that it's text of different names for the data set. So that's good. We've looked at the basics here. Next, we can go into like statistical summary, and that's where we use the describe function. So for this, we can call the describe function df.describe. And with this is what we find. We see that we have the mean, that's the mean value here, for each column calculated. You'll notice that the species column is not shown. That's because, it contains text and you can't calculate the average of texts or the mean of text, right? We also have the standard deviation calculated for each column as well. We have the minimum value for each of them. We have the maximum value. You have the median, which is the 50th percentile. You have the 75th percentile. You have the 25th percentile. And of course, you have the count. Now, what happens if you don't want just this limited number of percentiles? Let's say you want much more. You can provide a list and provide the percentiles you want. And it's going to give you those values. So you see you have the 20, 25th percentile, 80, and of course we always have the median. So in case maybe you are for whatever reason interested in looking at those other non-standard percentiles, and sure, you can definitely get it out from here. Now with this one function, it does all of this, calculates the average, standard deviation. Amazing. It's good for you to get an understanding of the data set using the describe function. So these are some of the basic Pandas functionality that you can come across, when it comes to dealing with data sets. Now we can look at some more. There's several of them, so many functions in Pandas. At this point, we've learned, the basics of working with Pandas. This is like the very, very basic. We've learned how to read in data using the read CSV function. There's read Excel, there's read SQL. We've learned how to look at the top few rows of a data set. We've learned how to look at the bottom rows of a data set. We've learned how to look at the sample. We've learned how to call the shape attributes. We've learned how to look at the information of a data set. I've looked at the describe function in Pandas. So at this point, we'll end this short video, and I'll see you in the next one where we cover some more interesting functions in Pandas. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.